Hello, everyone. I'll briefly present the country report that I have written with my colleague Sergiu Mișcoiu, professor from University of Cluj. I myself am Camil Pârvu. I'm a professor, associate professor at the University of Bucharest. We're both political scientists, and we wrote this country report by trying to highlight the contrast between the two key moments for the last 20 years that have been close to achieving a constitutional reform. Basically, it is a constitutional forum and a process of constitutional revision in 2013 and another one in 2018. There is a very important contrast between these two moments. One is a rather top-down type of process which started from the political reality of a two-thirds presence in the parliament of a coalition majority in the wake of the 2012 elections. And as in Hungary, Daniel was mentioning, you have two-thirds majority in the parliament, then you might simply proceed to enact a constitutional revision. In our case, however, that constitutional revision was initiated by a two-thirds majority constituted by a coalition, not by a single party. It was not Fidesz single-handedly steering the revision process, but it was two political parties that were for the first time together in this major coalition, two-thirds of the parliament, but then they failed to stay together for longer than just 2 years of time. So that initial process of revision was, however, even if it started from the political parties in question and it stopped with the political parties in question because the coalition disintegrated and the whole process never went through the parliamentary validation. However, it managed to create a half-year-long constitutional forum that was steered by a network of civil society organizations and NGOs, and it included a lot of stakeholders involved in deliberations and in setting up an agenda for the process of revision. It was nationally representative. They covered, they set up a lot of meetings throughout the territory, and they managed to include a lot of citizens involved into the proposal phase. So there was a lot of citizen involvement and experts involved, and that constitutional forum managed to produce a report. Unfortunately, it didn't really go through the parliament because there was no anymore a sufficient majority to make it pass. But what is clear is that the Constitutional Forum actually had a quite progressive output in terms of substance of the constitutional reforms they projected. It was pretty deliberative and participatory in the input and throughput phases of its deliberatory legitimacy, but again, ultimately, the output of it, all even quite progressive, or because it was pretty progressive, didn't really fare well with the political parties in the parliament who blocked it, right? So the whole process actually failed, but it was a very interesting experiment that for at least for some part of it, it was for basically the civil society and the participatory citizen element, it was pretty participatory and deliberative for 5 months or 6 months. The second process, very briefly, I'm going to just mention it. It's a very conservative effort to change the constitution in terms of the family definition. And precisely because it was a bottom-up effort, this time a citizens' initiative to ratify a constitutional change, the political parties were very little interested. They couldn't really profit politically or electorally from that process because there was no clear-cut division that they would instrumentalize. And ultimately, the 2018 modification of the constitution process was extremely sectarian, right? It was basically church-driven type of language about the family reform. It was very much church-oriented and very religiously informed, very little capacity to put out public reasons. Because the so-called progressive side of the civil society decided to boycott it completely, not even getting involved in this process, because they counted on the threshold of electoral participation for the referendum, right? So the referendum ultimately failed, but for participatory reasons, there was not enough participation to the referendum. But in any case, that process of change of constitution was no deliberative at all. It was partly participatory, but very one-sided. Only one side decided to participate in large numbers, but it was very sectarian in nature, right? It was one of the sides that didn't really have any interest in putting forth public reasons for any kind of deliberative effort. And so these two moments were presented in our country report, with preserving for both the structure of input, throughput, and output legitimacy.